Hello, retro fans. I'm very excited because eventually, finally, whatever we want to call this, I was able to create this final episode of my how to how I work series. And it took me quite a while to come up with an idea about how to select the winners. You may remember my Pi 1541 giveaway, which was about year ago, something like this. And I was using the number pi to select the winners by counting how often a certain, I think, number related to a letter or something like this appeared in within the first 1000 digits of pi or something like this. I may have to watch my own episode. And basically, I was not really happy with this approach because we ended up having 2 first places and 2 second places. And this time I was really interested in to find something that kind of provides a real first place, second place, third place, and so on. And I have to admit, it took me weeks to come up with an idea. And then I had the idea finally, and then I start to work on the, let's say on the program itself. And I had some pitfalls here and there, and I was really going through a couple of iterations, something I will talk about briefly when I introduce the solution finally. And therefore it took indeed a little bit longer than planned, and I really have to admit that this was kind of causing me some kind of sleepless nights, because I know you are waiting for this, and I really want to kind of finish this series as well, because I'd like to move on to new topics. I got new things I'd like to talk about. I got new repairs and all that things, and therefore we have to have some progress. So anyway, in this episode I will go through a couple of question and answers, and they have kind of arisen from the comments and some input from Twitter as well. And then I will introduce the solution about how to select the winners, or for how to select the winners, basically. And then we go through the progress of, selecting the winners. And here I am again, and the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the things I'm going to give away today. And I have prepared a image, because I'm going to need my desk in a few minutes, so I was not able to keep this stuff on my desk all the time. And as you can see, I have actually 5 items plus 1 item that's kind of a surprise, and this will go to kind of a 6th place or something like this. And basically I placed numbers on those items just to kind of separate them. And the first thing, it's the camera itself. I was talking in the camera episode. I was talking about. Let's use complete sentence. And this is an HDMI 1080p HD camera, and this can be used as HDMI as well as a USB camera. And I have attached an 8.5mm lens, which is very suitable for covering, let's say, a desk area, or even as a face cam it may work pretty well. So this is let's say close to wide angle. It's not a zoom lens, but it's not a fisheye either. So therefore I think that's going to be a pretty good start, and the quality of the lens is let's call it good. It's not superior, but it's really good lens, and I have used this in the past for quite a while, and I was really happy with it. But I moved on to a different set of lenses, and therefore I think this makes a good couple. And then you can see item number 2. It's going to be the Evermedia Extreme Cap U3. That's an USB 3 HDMI capture card. It is almost lag-free, so if you use this on your PC and you're using the captured preview, so to say, the captured picture, you can use this for gaming as well. I mean, it's not as lag-free as a CRT monitor on a real C64. That's something we cannot change, but especially for making videos and something like this, it works very good. So in the third place is going to be the Evermedia Live Gamer Portable. That was one of my first HDMI capture cards. I have used this a lot, and this works pretty well for capturing C64 stuff, for example, and things like this. But we have to keep in mind that for both HDMI capture card, you need something that converts your video signal into HDMI, obviously, or you are going to use the Ultimate 64, for example, or other HDMI enabled devices like the C64 Mini, or most of those new mini consoles like the Neo Geo Mini and so on. And then I got the fourth prize, and this is going to be some kind of a GoPro clone, and that's a camera you can use with an HDMI input as well as I think with USB, but I'm not sure. No, I'm not going to promise this, but you can power the camera by USB, so you do not have to rely on the internal battery. And it got, I think, 2 zoom options. So you can use this as a wide angle camera as well as a kind of not so wide angle. I'm not going to call it zoom. And it has a pretty decent picture quality, so especially as a face cam or something like this, or kind of an overview environment cam, it works pretty well. And as a final option, I'm offering 2 LED lights, and they are USB powered, but I have combined the power supply of those 2 LED lights to one connector, and therefore on a standard USB port they may not work properly. So I recommend using a standard USB power supply with about 1 ampere of power, and then you have 3 different light colors, color temperatures, and you can adjust the brightness. And if you want to light a small area like a desk or something like this, they work okayish. They are not pretty bright, but due to those let's say huge or bigger area compared to a spotlight light, they make a pretty decent light. So that's about the stuff we're talking about today. Then I have to check briefly what I have on my agenda. And the next thing is going to be the question and answers. I thought I had one scene prepared where we can see what I'm talking about, but that's combined with my desk and the C64 output. But well, let's just keep it and check briefly what we are talking about in the question and answers. So one question arrived regarding lighting. And lighting is a pretty interesting topic. Let's switch back to my desk view, because all those, let's say, capture cameras are pretty sensitive to, let's say, low light conditions. So this means they are not working very well if it's dark, to make it short. And the next thing is, especially if you get older, your eyes are not as good as they were when you were 20 or something like this. And especially for repair something like this, good light is more than essential. And I went through a couple of iterations there for the giveaway item. That was something I have used for about a year or something like this, and I was, let's say, quite happy with it. But due to the change to a different desk cam and well, the progress of getting older, I decided I need more light on my desk. And this time I was looking for something where I have the chance to adjust the color temperature, or at least get a certain color temperature. That's very important if you combine this LED lights with well, capture cameras, because they kind of, well, requires you to use a, let's say, narrow band of color temperature. So if you combine a couple of different lights, say a halogen light or an LED light or other kind of spots, and they all come with different color temperatures, then you may end up with having a, well, kind of strange picture in terms of colors. And that's one of the reasons why I picked this scene, because here we can see a green 469 C64 board, and we have a quite a broad mix of colors on this board and on the desk here as well. And I go and switch to the lights I'm using so that you can see what I'm talking about. And here are some pictures taken from the product information page, whatever you want to call this. So as you can see, it's an LED light panel. It's about, let's say, 5 to 20 centimeters or something like this. So it is indeed a little bit bigger than the ones we have seen on the first picture. And these lights are designed to use in conjunction with video cameras or cameras to light a scene during recording or photo shooting or something like this. And the good thing is that there are many of those products on the market, and therefore they have a very interesting price option. So we talk about, I think, about 30 euros per panel or something like this, so that's not really a big deal. And the interesting thing is that we can adjust the brightness and we can adjust the color temperature. Fortunately, they come with a pretty decent color temperature by stock, so you can use them straight away. And they are really close to the range they kind of promising. And therefore, it's very easy to set your capture camera to the same color temperature. So you do not have to use some auto white balance or something like this. You really just set the color temperature, and then you're sure that the camera is really capturing what you are going to show in a, let's say, more natural manner. And another thing that's interesting is that I'm not using the battery option. I'm using the DC supply version, or, well, variant. And I bought a 3 ampere 12 volt DC power supply and created the cable to power both panels at the very same time. So I'm using two of them, one on the right and one on the left side. And they come, as you can see on the right hand side, with a lot of different or additional, let's say, mounting material or mounting supplies. And this makes it pretty easy to get those panels attached to whatever kind of tripod or whatever frame system you are using. And you can adjust the angle and the position of those lights very easily. So, and if you just use this Wildtrox, whatever we want to call this, L1320 or 28 or 2B, I'm not sure. If you Google this or just check it at Amazon, you will find those type of panels. And I'm pretty sure you can get those panels even cheaper on some China seller pages, whatever. So, and in addition to this, and for this I'm going to switch to the desk so that we can see what I'm going to test here right now. If I'm going to dim those panels a bit, so they are not completely off, but on a very low setting. I'm using in addition an area light that's about 1.2 meters above my desk. That's where the light is coming from that shines on me right now. And this is not very bright, but the benefit is that it creates some kind of a consistent lighting over the place. And this avoids having harsh or hard shadows in all those positions, and creates kind of a, well, let's say soft ambient light, whatever we want to call this. But as you can see, it's not bright enough to light the whole scene, but adding more of those area lights above me would create kind of a, well, something like a sunburn or something like this. But well, they're kind of expensive as well, so I recommend having single light sources dedicated to your desk, and therefore you have the chance to change brightness and color in the place you really want to work on. So I'm just cranking it up a little bit, and I have them placed them on the left and on the right side, and they are angled a little bit, and this kind of avoids having a reflection of the light in the middle of the scene. You can see it here a little bit on the left hand side, on the right hand side, that there is some kind of reflection, but there is no direct reflection in let's say the same angle as the camera, for example. So I think so much about lighting. It's a very important thing, but you do not have to spend hundreds of euros for this. There are really good solutions in, let's say, the low price area, and well, you can order it, test it, and if it's not fitting your needs, then well, send it back. So the next thing I have on my list is the topic USB. And USB is a very complicated thing, especially if we talk about USB and Windows. And what I'm talking about is connecting devices like a USB camera, USB microphone, USB capture card to your PC, for example. And especially if you are a, let's say, developer or something like this, and you have to work with a lot of different USB devices, and you attach your devices on a kind of daily basis, and you plug in your camera to a different USB port, you may have recognized that Windows is going to install a driver for this device again, even if you have used the device in the past, because Windows used to install driver for the device per port, per USB port. And this is indeed an issue, because this may lead to the problem that your device is getting a different device ID, and therefore the connection between your source in OBS and this device may break. OBS is no longer able to find the device under the old device ID, and this may create a problem that you have to go through your scenes before you start your recording, live session, whatever, to check whether all those devices are available. And therefore I recommend to connect your main devices like microphone, camera, USB audio interface, all that things, to the very same USB port all the time, and just leave it there. It makes your life much more easier. And then if you are going to use Windows, then there is some kind of hope and pray involved as well. There is no better solution, I think. And the second topic about USB is the topic USB 3. And this is indeed a very complicated area as well, especially if we're going to use the Evermedia Extreme Cap U3, the USB 3 capture card. This card is kind of requiring a certain chipsets for the USB 3 chipset, USB 3 connection. And my PC board I have used is basically equipped with this chipset, but I had a lot of issues getting the capture card to run in a stable manner. because this USB 3 controller shares some I/O lines with the PCIe bus and different devices on those board as well, and therefore it was pretty unreliable. And I have used a dedicated USB 3 interface card, which I have installed to my PC with one of those required chipsets as well. And with this interface card, this capture card has worked very well. I will try to find it. It's not longer installed on my PC because I went to capture cards internally, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere in my shelf, and if I'm going to find this, I will put this to this Extreme Cap U3 capture card as a kind of bonus. So much about USB. I think that's more than enough. And the last thing that has been asked was OBS settings regarding frame rate, codec resolution. And for this I have prepared a picture, because I make the learning that going through OBS settings in a live session is a bit difficult, so to say. And therefore we switch to the picture here. And as you can see, I have basically two main settings, and one is on the left hand side. It's the video setting itself, and most of the time I'm using base resolution, which is basically 1080p full HD, and the output resolution is going to be the very same. But in terms I'm creating videos for social media platforms like Twitter or something like this, that makes mostly no sense to upload HD videos. Then I switch the output resolution to 720p, which is more than suitable for platforms like this. And then the downscale filter comes into place as well. And I'm using this Lanczos, whatever we want to call this, filter, because this creates some let's say a more brilliant image than the other ones. It may cost some CPU power, but most of the stuff is done by the GPU anyway, and therefore I think it's not going to play a huge role. And then you may wonder what this fractional FPS value is all about. And the reason is most of those videos are recorded in 50 frames per second, but if we're going to use a C64, a PAL C64, then if you do some research, you may learn that the C64 is not outputting a 50.00 FPS signal. Now it's a 50.14 FPS signal, and therefore I have created this fractional FPS value to match my video capturing to the C64 output. This creates some troubles with connected cameras, because they run at 50 FPS, but especially for cameras, or let's say the video or the information we are going to capture with the cameras, it is not so important if you have, let's say, minor or micro stuttering. And for the C64 output, especially if you're going to record demos, or if you have games with which are scrolling a lot and all that stuff, then it's really important that you have micro stutter free video content. And therefore I set this fractional FPS value to these numbers, because they provide 15.14 FPS. Moving on to the right hand side, we can see these are my recording settings. And it is basically quite simple. You have a recording path. That's my SSD. So I do not have a magnetic hard disk I'm recording to. I'm using this SSD. This makes the system load a little bit lower, or at least it works better in whatever way. I think it's simply state of the art, so therefore. And recording format is MKV. I have used MP4 for a lot of my videos in the past, but every now and then I had a problem that I ended up with a broken video. So if your system crashes, if your OBS is crashing, or your hard disk is full or something like this, then it's almost certain that the video is lost. And therefore I was very happy to see that with one of the latest releases of OBS, I'm now able to record multiple audio tracks in the MKV format as well. And the reason why I'm using multiple audio tracks is that I have routed the different sound sources I'm using for my setup, like a microphone, like the sound input coming from the C64, then my background player or video content I'm showing in between of my videos to different audio tracks. And if I end up with a video where perhaps the background music is too loud or something like this, or I just recognize that my voice is no longer recognizable when playing games over the C64, for example, then I have the chance to do some post-editing and adjust audio levels separately, and I do not have to go through the whole video session again just to correct this, let's say, mistake. So that's very interesting, and you have to use the advanced mixer options to assign your audio channels to those different tracks. And I record sum of all audio tracks to audio track 1, or audio sources. Well, yeah, I think it's a better term, audio sources to audio track 1. And if I upload the video to YouTube directly, or if I'm going to stream the video live, then all my audio sources are, well, hearable. They are there. And just in case I have to do some post-editing, I have split the different audio inputs to the remaining audio tracks, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Yeah. Encoder, I'm using this NVIDIA NVENC H.264, whatever. And the good thing is that most of this encoding work is done by the GPU, therefore I do not have that high CPU load, and the whole system feels more, well, usable. That's one of the benefits of having a kind of, well, modern NVIDIA card. And rescale output is only interesting if you're going to stream live, or if you want to record a lower resolution. That's basically almost the same option we talked about on the left hand side. So I leave this usually most of the time at unchecked mode. And then we come to, let's say, the bitrate and bitrate control, all that things. And as you can see, I'm using a bitrate of 15K, which is perhaps a little bit overkill for the content I'm presenting right now. Because, I mean, if you keep in mind that the C64 outputs not even a 720p signal, and then we are recording this in full HD with 15K, that's perhaps really indeed too much. But I like to take, let's say, screenshots or pictures out of the video every now and then. And especially if I am working with detailed zoom camera settings of my desk, then it makes kind of a difference. But I think 12K or even 10K are, well, more than enough as well. The thing is, if you're going to upload this to YouTube, YouTube will kind of downsize the bitrate anyway, depending on the content and the material. I haven't found any real good, let's say, formula when they are going to do this and when not. But my learning was that if I'm uploading an 8K or 10K video, then it ends up even worse. And therefore I'm using a 12 or 15K most of the time. If you have a good internet connection and your PC can handle this, then there's nothing against a high bitrate, and the quality is indeed a bit better. And the other options are basically stock, so that's nothing I have touched so far. If you have multiple GPUs, then you can select which GPU is doing the work. I have used this in the past when I was running an SLI setup, but now I just have one NVIDIA card, and therefore it's 0. And max B frames and keyframe interval seconds, well, that's something I haven't touched so far, and basically it is working fine. So I think that's basically enough with the question and answers, and I think it's about time to talk about the winner selection concept. And as I was starting the video with, it took me quite a while to come up with an idea. But finally, I think I found something that is kind of geeky, it is fun, and it is kind of fair. Because the problem is that nobody of those participants can influence this system. And therefore I have to come up with something that's kind of balanced. And if you are a regular, frequent watcher of The Big Bang Theory, and you may know the character Sheldon, then you may know that he is every now and then using a game called Rock, Paper, Scissor, Lizard, Spock. And I thought this is going to be a cool idea to select the winners. So I was thinking about a system to let all the participants play against each other, rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. And in this graphic we can see the relationship between those items. So as you can see, scissor cuts paper, paper covers rock, rock crushes lizard, lizard poisons Spock, Spock smashes scissors. And then we have the inner circle, and here we have kind of the same loop. Scissors decapitates lizard, well, what a word. Lizard eats paper, paper disproves Spock, Spock vaporizes rock, rock crushes scissors. So, and this is basically the set of rules. It's, well, kind of simple, and the next step was to get this into, well, a program that is doing the work for me. And this was kind of a fun session on the one side, but it was a little bit demanding on the other side, because I had to implement so many things into the program. I haven't thought about this at the beginning. And so kind of in the middle of the progress, I kind of regretted to wander on this path. But finally, I think I came out with something that first looks cool, is easy to maintain, and creates some kind of unpredictable results. And this is the very important thing, so that we are not ending up with any kind of blame that the system was manipulated or skewed or unbalanced or biased, whatever we want to call this. And how I have approached this is going to something I will talk about briefly. And for this we are going to switch to this view. And here we can see I'm using the CBM Studio, and that's indeed the very first time I have used an approach like this. So the last time I was really doing all this programming work on the C64 itself, but I thought especially for this project I really have to use some other kind of tools, because I have touched topics I have used about 20-25 years ago. So especially this whole sprite handling and all that things was indeed a bit a challenge for me, but this CBM Studio has, well, helped me a lot during the whole process. And I'm pretty sure I'm not even using 10% of all the functions of this fantastic tool set, but for me it was more than sufficient, and it was very, very helpful to develop this whole thing. And I think I talk a little bit about the approach, and then we should move on to the C64 and check the program itself. So basically it is quite simple. I have used the sprite editor from the CBM Studio, and I've created the sprites, and I have used the screen editor as well to create a gaming screen. And basically I have used a basic file function to create my basic program. And the very cool thing is that I can create different versions of my program. So every time I was going to implement a new feature or I was changing some functions, then I created kind of a new version and had the chance that if I spoil this whole thing, then I can go back and use my previous version. And the program itself is pretty chaotic because I had no real approach, I had no real strategy, so I really started with the things that came to my mind and where I had an idea how to solve them, and then I worked on the several parts step by step, and therefore the numbering is a bit erratic, and there's perhaps a little bit too much goose up basic things inside this program. I'm very sorry for this, but that's basically not my main business, but well, it is doing the work, and therefore I'm quite happy with the result. So, and as I said at the very beginning, we have to create a couple of sprites, and I'm using this read data approach, getting the data from the lines created by CBM Studio with the sprite editor. So that's very, very comfortable. And then we have some kind of input, how many players, and then we can enter the player names, and then the program starts to create kind of a screen, gaming screen, which is basically the main environment for the game itself. And then I had a big problem how to combine all the players, and I spent days on reading tournament concepts like the KO system, the double KO system, the Danish approach and the Switzer approach, and whatever. There are so many different methods of getting many players together and ending up with one winner. But basically everything was a little bit too complicated because most of the systems require a certain amount of players. And as we are going to see in a couple of minutes, we do not have this. And therefore I needed a system that's more flexible in terms of number of players. And I needed a system where we really end up with very distinguished scores at the end. And I came up with the approach that I'm using this every player plays against each other players. So first player plays against second, third, fourth, fifth, and the second player plays against the third and fourth and fifth, and so on. And then we have a first round, and we have a first kind of standing. And then I'm going through this standing, checking whether two players having the same score, then they play against each other, and then I'm checking again, are there players with the same score, then they play against each other. And I'm doing this as long as required until we end up with a standing with no double scores at all. It sounds pretty easy when I'm talking about this right now, but I can promise you it took me about a few days until I came up with this idea at all, and then it took me a little bit to get this into a basic program, because there's a lot of if then and a lot of jumping and a lot of different conditions, and I have to admit the C64 standard basic is not very comfortable in this manner. So perhaps I should have used a I'm sorry, I should have used a basic extension or something like this, but I want to make this program available, so I will upload this to, I don't know, Google or something, and then you can download the program and you can use it and you can have a look at it. and then we may have a chat afterwards how to improve the whole thing. But basically, for me, for this episode, it's a tool, and therefore I think I'm pretty happy with the result. So much chatting about some basic lines. I think it's going to get a little bit boring right now, and I think it's about time to move on to the winner selection itself. And for this, I have created, wrong button, I'm sorry. I have set up my kind of C64, and the reason for this is I want to show that I'm using almost stock C64 board. The only thing I have changed is this modulator mod, and this is probably not going to affect the whole system at all. And I have attached my Pi 1541 and my keyboard, and that's basically all we are going to use for the setup. And therefore I think it is pretty, let's say, reproducible. And the interesting fact is that during my work with the CBM Studio, I was using Wise as an emulator. And I'm not a big fan of Wise in particular, but it was kind of, well, the implementation was easy, and it has worked quite fine for the progress. And as soon as I moved the program to the C64, I just recognized that the random number generation I'm using for this program, something I'm going to talk about in a second, worked in a different way compared to Wise. And therefore I had a problem that my my game system was not balanced any longer. And the funny fact is that basically I'm creating a random number between 1 and 5, because we have a rock, paper, scissor, lizard, Spock. We have got 5 items. And if we talk about the random number generator as a being, it is not able to predict which of those numbers is going to win, because in this rock, paper, scissor, lizard, Spock system, you cannot say that the 3 is winning all of the time. It depends on the opponent, and therefore we need 2 numbers, and the relationship of these numbers, well, brings up a winner and a loser. And therefore it was really a bit tricky to balance this random number system to have kind of an even winning-losing ratio on the right and on the left side. We are going to see this in a minute. And the main idea was the random function of the C64 BASIC is not really the best on this world, and therefore I had a different idea, and this is related to the most famous device on this board at all, the SID chip, because you are able to read back frequencies over a certain register of the oscillator 3 of the SID chip. And I thought, well, I'm doing so much stuff with the SID chip and the sound and all that stuff, I have to use this approach to create random numbers. And I was Googling this, and obviously I'm not the first person coming up with this idea, and therefore I was not really surprised to find a kind of, let's say, ready-to-use solution, which I have adapted for my purpose. And what I'm doing, basically, I'm creating 2 random numbers using the basic function, R&D, and the timer of the C64. And these 2 numbers are used as the base frequency for the oscillator 3 of the SID. And the SID is playing basically this noise waveform based on the base frequency. And then I'm picking just, well, the frequency back over a peak command. I was losing the word, I'm sorry. And this provides a number between 0 and 255. So I have to divide this by 52, I think, to come up with a number between 0 and 4. And then I'm using this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for my 5 options for the game. And I'm doing this basically 2 times, player 1 and player 2. And after some tweaking of the base frequency random generation, the system is kind of balanced. I just learned that especially with a lower player count, the system tends to be a little bit biased to one side or the other. But starting, let's say, with 5 or 6 players, everything is well distributed, I would say. So much about statistics. I think it's really enough right now. Let's move on to the C64 itself. And let's pick this scene. We can see what I'm doing here on my desk. So as I said, I have attached my Pi 1541, and we're going to load a directory, and hopefully you're going to find my basic program. There's a lot of stuff on my USB stick, and here we can see I ran through a couple of iterations testing the program on the C64 itself as well, which is indeed not as comfortable as doing this with the emulator, but this was the target and therefore I had to do it in this way. So we're going to load the program. I'm not using any floppy speed or something like this, and it wouldn't work with single files anyway. Therefore we have to wait a few seconds, and here we go. Rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. Takes a few seconds to generate the sprites, but we have to do this just once, and then we can enter the number of players. And I think as some kind of a dress rehearsal, we're going through a virtual, artificial set of games right now. Let's pick 5 players, and since it's quite actual right now, let's call them like this. So then we got Kyle, we got John, and we got T800, and we got Skynet. So, and that's the basic screen, or the basic game screen. And as you can see, the program is going to go through all the players, and they come up with their proposal on the left and the right hand side, and then we can see colored who has won this round. And if one player already won 2 times, then we are not going to go through the third option because it's not going to change anything at all. It's basically a best of 3. And if they come up with the very same option, then they have to play again, just to avoid that we are running out of, let's say, space on my screen. And as you can see, player 1 played against player 2, 3, 4, 5, and then player 2 was playing against 3, 4, 5, and so on. And at the end, the program was checking whether there are some scores twice, and then those players played again, and then the program was checking again, and then we came up with this player points, as we can see at the bottom at the screen. And since this is a bit uncomfortable, I have created a kind of standing, and we can see Sarah won with 5 points, followed by Kyle 4 points, John and Skynet and T800, and so on. And the interesting thing is that this situation we can see here right now, we have between 3 and 1 we got a gap. The 2 is missing, and this is a very rare situation. So it means the T800 never won a single game, and since this situation is really rare, I had a lot of headache implementing this function, because every time this happened, my program kind of got stuck in a loop. And it took me really a couple of, perhaps not hours, but well, it took me a moment to figure out how to do the sorting when we have a gap in the score. And especially when the program was checking whether there are 2 scores twice in the standing, it had some issues handling this situation. And the very first game I'm going to present here in this video is exactly covering this situation. Anyway, so we want to play it again, so we can press yes. And now we have to enter the number of players. And this is about time to move on to my list. and here we have to scroll a little bit, and here we have the participants for the different items, so to say. And let's start with the camera. And we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 participants for the camera. So we end up 6. And the first name is going to be AWSM, which stands probably for awesome, I think so. Then we got David. Then we got Eva. Then we have Michael. Then we have von Milhausen. It reminds me of Milhouse from The Simpsons, but... And we got Chris. And let's see who's going to win the first round. I was talking about the balance, and as you can see on somewhere in the middle of the screen, we have wins left and wins right. And this stands for the side and not for the players itself. And as we can see, the left hand side, or well, yeah, is kind of lagging behind. And now it's making some progress. And initially I had the idea to assign the players to the sides by random as well, but this would require a major change in the whole program. And I'm not even sure if adding more random items is going to improve the progress. And therefore I left it this way because, as I said, most of the time starting with 5, 6 players, the system is quite balanced, and therefore I think it is fair enough. And basically it is kind of a lottery, therefore we have to live with the fact that someone is going to win and someone is going to lose. So we're making good progress here so far. As you can see, we are done with this. And if you pay attention during the game to the player points at the bottom, you can see every time we have a pair of numbers, the program is going to address this, starting with the highest numbers and then working down the whole, let's say, ladder of numbers until every pair was kind of, well, eliminated. So, and if we're going to hit the key, we can see Eva won this round. So let's add this to our list and say this is basically, I have to use a different keyboard indeed. First place, and then we have Chris is the second place, and then we have from Milhouse third place, and we got David on 4, and we got Michael on 5th, and we got Mr. Awesome on 6. So, and then let's move on to the next round, the capture cards. So we're going to play again, yes, and now we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 participants. So we enter 5 here, and we got Michael, and we got Awesome again, we got Chris, we got the Highlander, and we got von Milhouse. And that's basically all. And now let's see what's going to happen. So the speed of this countdown and this little break until the program moves to the next round is adjustable, and I was going to implement a speed function so that you can enter a speed number at the beginning of the game. So, and I will going to implement this when I'm working on the single player part of the game. I want to make this game accessible for, well, human players as well, so that you can play against the system. Either against many of them or just one-to-one. and therefore it perhaps makes some sense to slow down the timer a little bit, but especially for this purpose, selecting winners of a giveaway activity, I think the speed is more than sufficient. The game is playable with up to 20 players. I have a little graphic problem with the points, and they run a little bit out of the right-hand border. But especially if you have 20 players and want to observe the program progress, then you really have to, well, take some time. It really takes a little bit longer than just having 5 players. And I have tested this with Wise in warp mode, just to go through so many different scenarios to check whether the code is, let's say, stable. So, and we are finished. And this is the final standing. So the Highlander won this round. So let's add first place. Then Chris got second. And Chris got second with the cameras as well. So that's interesting. And we got Michael on third. And we got von Milhausen on fourth. And once again, Awesome is on last place. I'm really sorry for this. So I hope you believe me that this is not going to be a conspiracy or something like this. That's really, well, happened. And for the light, I think I have not really promised to give away the light. That's something that just came up while Michael was kind of asking for this light topic, and I just found those LED lights in my shelf, and I think I'm going to put this on into your package as well. And well, basically just 2 capture cards, so it's kind of a third prize for Michael. And last but not least, I have the Lukas music collection on was something with G. Well, I have to check this. I bought this to support Lukas with a charity project, and since I already got all of Lukas music in digital form, I will give this away. And I think let's have a final round with all participants to see who is going to get the Lukas music collection. So let's play again. And this time I think we have 7 participants, because we're going to add the Highlander to the first round as well. And then let's see who is going to win the Lukas music. We got David, we got Eva, we got Michael, we got von Milhausen, we got Chris, and last but not least we got the Highlander. Let's write the Highlander. And then let's see who's going to listen to Lukas music pretty soon. So for the more program interested people, the system or the program is using basically 7 sprites, and they have fixed positions, and I'm just assigning different memory areas to those sprites, and therefore they change their shape. So basically the sprites are visible all of the time, but if they are not visible, I just set them to a memory area where is nothing, so zeros, and therefore they do not show anything at all. And after a round you can see that the sprites are white, and then the program checks who is the winner of this round, and then I do the coloring of the sprites afterwards. Therefore we have this very brief moment where the sprites are white, and this was a funny situation. We had 3 rounds having the same items, so the program goes through this over and over again. And so I do not have any sprite placement beyond this 255 border. Therefore the positioning of the sprites was pretty easy, and this was basically one of the simplest parts of this program, except perhaps for Spock's hand, where the pixeling was a bit more complicated compared to the other items. So we are already in the second round. So the program is trying to eliminate the pairs, and this progress pushes the scores up and up again until we end up with one clear order. I'm pretty sure this can be optimized as well, but this was basically not really the purpose of this exercise. I'm more than happy that I came up with this, and if I have the time and if I'm in the mood to work on such things, I may spend some more time on this whole procedure. But I think the main focus is going to be the single player option, and then I'm basically done with this. So we got results, and surprisingly, Awesome is on first place, and I'm pretty happy because he lost 2 rounds completely, and now he is the winner of this round. So the Lukash collection is going to AWSM. I just assume that this was that this is standing for awesome. And then basically we are done with this winner selection. I hope everybody is kind of happy with this approach, and well, the good old C64 was able to do the work for us, and I hope this approach or the idea itself is something that fits to your interests as well. And basically I will add a link to the description section of this video. This link will lead you to a Google form where you can enter your, well, let's say, shipment information. So we do not have to share email addresses publicly and all that stuff. So just use this form, and then you can tell me where you want to have your stuff sent to. And the Lukash music collection, that's basically something that's going to be over the page where you can download the stuff. There's a gift option I will go to use, and the other stuff is going to be packed and shipped within, let's say, the next week. I hope I will be able to do this quite quickly. And that's basically, well, yeah, the end of this video. It's already long enough. I was not expecting that it takes about an hour. But that's one of my well, issues perhaps. I talk too much, but basically I think every piece of information was well suited, and therefore, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and a big thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon, and sometimes on Ko-Fi, and especially all of my buddies over there at Twitter. It's really a very, very nice community, and I appreciate all the input and all the help, all the information over there. And if you have not done so, feel free to subscribe to my channel. That's something I highly appreciate. It shows me that there's indeed some interest of what I'm doing here right now. And basically, that's all for this episode. I'm going to make this as a premiere on YouTube. So we will have a live chat. I will set this to quite late time here in Europe, so that your buddies from America have a chance to join this. And that's basically all for the day.